This is a basic tutorial video on the Glidecam software, which we're using on the Glidecam Centurion. So the only things you're going to need are your Centurion, the connection cable, which is labeled to PC. I already have it plugged in right here. And then you're also going to want the USB thumb drive. If for some reason you misplace this, then you can also get the software directly off the Glidecam website or off Glidecam website. Also, newest versions of software and firmware are on there. So you'll plug in your USB thumb drive, and on the thumb drive it has the software, it has the saved profiles for your Glidecam. So every Centurion is custom programmed, and I can't emphasize enough how you need to save your profiles before you make any changes. If you happen to mess something up with your profiles, then the backup is on the USB thumb drive, but it's also good just to make sure you save everything on your computer ahead of time. So to access the software, then you'll just open the thumb drive and you'll see the drivers which you need to install for your computer, whether it's a Mac or PC. You'll want to install the appropriate drivers. So for the Mac, you'll go right here and install those drivers. I already have the drivers installed on here, and before you open the software, you're going to want to connect it. So the order matters for connecting to the computer. You don't have to turn the power on your gimbal, but if you want to see any of the changes as you're adjusting things in the software, you're going to need power to the motors. So we'll go ahead and turn the power on. And then we will connect the cable. We'll go ahead and open the software right here. So where it says simple BGC GUI.jar, this is the file you want to open for a Mac. The exe is going to be for PC. So sometimes if it's the first time opening this file, you'll want to control click on it and say open, and then you'll direct it to open after that. Since I've already opened it on my computer, all I need to do is double click on the software and it'll open up right here. We'll go ahead and make it full screen. In the newer beta version of the software, you can go under the View tab right here and click the classic view, or you can do a basic view. There's different levels that you can view right there, or you can say full screen. Now that we're open, to actually connect, you need to select right here what you're connecting to. With a Bluetooth device, which we don't currently have, you would select that right here. We want to select right here where it says USB to UART. And then you're going to say connect. When it has connected, you'll see on the right-hand side here that it's reading the live view data coming from the gimbal. So if I'm moving the pitch up and down, you can actually see that moving on the right-hand side. It's going to show the voltage of the battery and any of the movement here. So now that we're connected, first thing you want to do is save your settings. So in the upper right-hand corner, we're in Profile 1, and then you click Save. Name it, so it just automatically comes up as Profile 1. You can customize the name if you want, and then we're saving under our Profiles tab, so I'll go ahead and say Save. So now we have a backup of this profile. If you're going to make any changes, I do recommend going to the lock mode in Profile 3. It's the easiest mode for adjusting the performance. So if you want to go to Profile 3, select that, and then hit Write. So anytime you make a change to the software, you want to hit Write, and that's actually going to write it to the controller on the gimbal. So I'm just going to run through some of the most important things in the software that you may want to change to affect the performance of your gimbal. First thing you'll see here is the PID settings. And every gimbal on the market operates off of these PID settings. So it may look a little intimidating, but it's good to get to know what's going on. There's also the power, which is showing how much power I'm sending to the motors. You can go up to 250, but I don't recommend going that high because then your motors will get really hot If you do increase the power setting, just make sure you feel your motors as you're operating so that they're not actually getting too hot. There's a built-in safety where if it overheats, it'll shut off. Just try not to exceed too high of a power. If you're going to operate a larger camera, then I would recommend increasing this power. So for the pitch, you would want to go in here and maybe put it up to 100. So you type that in and then hit right. With our camera right here, which is pretty light, it doesn't need that high of a power. And if you increase the power too much, then you're going to get more vibrations from the motors. So I'm not sure if you can hear that right now, but you do get a little bit more of a buzz with that higher power. The performance might be a little bit better, and if there's kind of like a happy medium where you want the power high enough where you have good performance, but not too high where you're getting too many vibrations. The other thing is the D value. This is I refer to as dampening. PID actually stands for proportional integral derivative, which you don't need to know that. But D I just like to think of as dampening, P in terms of power, and I is a variable that helps the speed coming back to the original position. So if your P is too low, then you're not going to get enough power to the motors. And if your D is too low, then the performance isn't going to be optimal and you're going to get more like shaky footage. So and then the I, you're going to want to keep usually pretty low. You may not even need to ever change the I value. But let's just say you put a bigger camera on here and the footage is maybe bouncing a little bit with the pitch motor. So you may want to actually increase that D value. Increase it just enough so it helps the performance, but not too much so you're getting more vibrations. I'll just give you an example right here. If I put the D value up to, let's say 150, which is way too high, but then you're going to notice on this pitch that you're going to get a lot more vibrations. You'll probably hear it. So say right. There, now you can probably hear that we have more vibrations, and you may notice those vibrations in the performance. So we'll go ahead back down to 50. Put that pitch down, back down to 60. And now the vibrations have gone away. The other thing that helps with this is the adaptive PID gains. We have it selected for each axis, and this actually changes the value as you're operating. If you're going to a different angle, you may get vibrations at this angle, and so it's going to automatically lower those settings if you're changing angles. And you may or may not want this. You may want it to just stay the same all the time, in which case you would uncheck these. But it's just a couple things you can play around with. The invert is unique to every gimbal, so don't mess with that. Make sure it's saved. You may have, for example, the pitch checked, and I don't have the pitch checked. If the invert is not correct, then the gimbal is going to move the opposite direction. So if I'm in the follow mode and I'm trying to tip the camera up in the air, point it up, if it's inverted improperly, it might point down, or the axis might just continually spin. So it's just something to be aware of right here. 28 poles is what all these motors are set at. Another custom setting to the gimbal is the sensor orientation, which is actually mounted right in here by the motor. And on this gimbal, this is how it's going to read Y and -Z. So some maintenance you may need to do with your gimbal is calibrating the sensor. And I recommend doing this at least once a year. If you change or upgrade your software and firmware, you're probably also going to need to do this. I don't recommend updating your software unless you have an issue and you really need to, because then you're probably going to need to recalibrate your sensor and your encoders. But to calibrate, then you'll go right in here to the IMU calibration help. And then after I click that, the motors will disengage. Then you can change the position of the sensor and calibrate it for every axis. To get the best performance, you want to check next to each axis, and it means that it's going to be calibrated all around. To begin the calibration, if you're going to be redoing it, I recommend start hitting the reset button for the accelerometer and then reset for the gyro. And then you can follow through the 6-point calibration, which is in the manual. So this feature is actually really nice. The computer will tell you when you're moving to a new axis. You'll hear it click, and then you'll hit calibrate, change the axis, hit calibrate, and do that for every side. Once you've calibrated the sensor, then you can close out of here. And I just am always in the habit of saying right after I do anything. So for the basic tab, that is all the information you need to know. The motors are still disengaged, so to re-engage them, you'll just hit motors on and off on the bottom left-hand side, and it starts right back up. So the advanced tab, move on to that. And again, depending on which version of software you're using, the layout of this may be different, but you're going to have all the same features. So in this version of software, the advanced tab, the main things that you'll need to know are, if you scroll down, you'll see right here the working positions. Frame upside down auto detect. It's nice to have that checked. There is a briefcase mode which you could check. Upside down pitch auto rotate. I never usually have that set. Set to normal position on profile switch, and center yaw axis at startup. Both these are actually pretty nice to have. It just means if your gimbal is kind of off to the side, whenever you start up, it's always going to center out. We'll move on to the RC tab. So in the RC tab, this is where you can program the joystick, and then if you want to hook up a remote control, then you can also set that remote control settings here. Remote control would connect into the back where it says receiver, and you'll have to program that RC device in the RC tab. But for the joystick, something you may want to know, we have it set to speed mode. Scroll down here. The speed is set if you want to increase that speed. So say the pitch is moving slower than you want, you can go in here and say 40, right? Now it moves a lot faster, but we'll keep it at 20. Don't need it to move too fast. Say right. You'll notice right here the yaw is inverted. So if I want it to go right now the opposite direction, then I'll just click the inverse and hit right. So now this is actually the direction I want it to go. So if I'm pushing the joystick to the right, the camera is moving to the right. To the left, camera is moving to the left. Same with the pitch. If for some reason you want that inverted, you can change it right here by checking the inverse. Another thing you may want to do is set an expo curve. So right now it's at 0, and it means that the speed's going to be pretty constant with joystick. If I say 50, right? Now if I move slow with the joystick, the camera slowly moves. And the faster or further I push the joystick, the faster it's going to move. So it's actually exponentially set to move however fast I'm moving the joystick. So 50 is actually a pretty nice number to have that set to. Limited accelerations, we do leave at 500, and this will affect the performance. If for some reason you put it at 0, then the gimbal isn't going to respond as fast as you want it to. And if it's too high, it may actually overshoot its position. So 500 is where we set it, but it's also another variable that you can experiment with. The LPF also affects that. So if your LPF is too high, then the gimbal might overshoot its position. And same with if it's too low. So 3 is a good number for the Centurion. So that's about it for the RC tab. Move on to the service tab. Service tab is where you're going to set what you want each profile to be. So one click of the joystick is going to go to the follow mode. 2 clicks is what we have set to our lock pitch mode, and 3 clicks is the fully lock mode, which we have programmed up here for the different profiles. So you can customize a profile. Let's say profile 4 right now has nothing programmed for it. So if you want a profile that has a faster follow mode, you can set that to profile 4, and then right here in the service tab, you would select 4 clicks is use profile 4. There's also a bunch of different actions that you can select under here, like calibrating the sensor, switching motors, resetting controller. We do have the Pid Auto Tune in the software, but this is still more of a beta format and I don't recommend using it. It's best just adjusting the values that we ship the gimbal with. If you go back to the basic, there's the auto calibrate right here. And if you do use it, do one motor at a time and make sure to read the manual before you actually do any of the auto tuning. Again, I don't recommend using the Pid Auto Tune. It's best just to manually do it right now. So what else on the service tab? It shows the battery voltage. You can also set the buzzer or beeper. And right now, if you don't want it to beep as loud, you can lower that volume and hit right. It beeps at calibration, command confirmation. If you don't want these beeps, just uncheck that and your gimbal's never going to beep. We'll usually keep it right in the middle for the volume. And then I like to be notified or have the gimbal tell me when it's changing modes or calibrating. So we just leave the buzzer set for these commands. In the follow mode, this is another area you may want to customize. If you're gonna be operating really fast and you want a faster follow mode, so then you'll actually want to adjust these settings on the right hand side. Since we're in the lock mode, you can see on the left it says disabled. So right now the gimbal isn't moving in any direction. The camera is just pointed in one place. If I want it to actually have a follow mode, I could go to profile 1, or I can actually say follow yaw and follow pitch and roll. And then I would say right. And now the camera tracks my movement, which is the exact same as profile 1. So we're going to leave profile 3 locked, disable it. Say right. And then I'll just actually go to profile 1 to show you how to adjust this. So now that we're in profile 1, say right. And we have an exponential curve set. So as I pan right and left, it'll slowly move with my movements if I'm moving slow, and it'll move faster as I move faster. So it's nice to have the expo curve set to around 50. The deadband degrees right now is set at 0, which means it's going to start tracking my movements immediately, which is really nice if you're following around a subject. Say there's a person's head and I want to walk around them and keep them center framed, then I would recommend having this set at 0. If you're going to be doing a lot of running and you don't want it to move as you're running, like if I'm running, it's going to start moving left and right a little bit. So that is actually where you may want the deadband set. If you set it to 10, that's going to be 10 degrees left and right that you can move the handlebars and the gimbal's not going to move. So you can notice if I'm moving the handlebars, the camera is still pointed in the same direction until I pass that 10 degrees, and then the camera starts tracking. But you have a little wiggle room right in there where the camera doesn't move. I've personally noticed the best performance is usually with it set to 0, and you just have to really make sure you know where you're pointing it. and just try and not move your arms as you're running or doing any activity. The speed is set right down here. So we have the pitch set to 40 and the yaw to 60, which is the speed that we like to operate. So that's where we program it. If you want the pitch to move faster, say we'll put that at 100 and right. Now it moves really fast. But sometimes if the speed is really high, it'll overshoot, as you can see right there, and you're not going to get as smooth of a performance with that speed so high. So we could also put it down to 10, which is really slow. And then you can see as I move the handlebars, if I move it up really quick, the camera takes its time to get to that position. So that's, in my opinion, even too slow. So we'll just set it back at 40. The other settings here you don't really need to mess with. Make sure this is at 90, otherwise the roll will also start moving with you. And you pretty much always want the roll to keep a level horizon, so don't need to bother with that. Monitoring tab is can be really nice for checking your gimbal performance. So it'll show the real-time data. It's acting a little slow right now, but it'll show the performance of your gimbal in real time. And if you're changing your PID values back here, then you may want to adjust that and then go to the monitoring tab and see actually how it changes any vibrations. Then the upgrade tab, this is where you can check for the latest versions of the firmware. You always need to make sure you use matching firmware and software. So if you're going to update the firmware, you also need to update your software. And again, I just recommend keeping the same firmware and software you have if everything's working fine. If you do update this, you're also going to need to probably recalibrate your sensors. So it's best just to keep it where you're at. If you do want to update, then you can hit the check button, and always make sure you're using an encoder version because the motors have encoders. If you don't have an encoder version, then you're not going to get the performance from the encoders, which really helps the motors. But this will show all the previous versions of the firmware. So if you wanted to update, you would hit upgrade right here, and then it'll take a little while for it to upgrade, and then you're going to need to reboot the software afterwards. Debug tab, you don't need to worry about. Encoders tab, this is where you actually program the encoders in each motor. So we have already calibrated this before we've shipped your gimbal, but if you want to recalibrate maybe once a year, then this is the tab you would do that in. This is the type of encoder we're using, the AS5600. I2C is just referencing a sensor. And something you might want to change is the manual set time. So I have it set to 2 seconds for every axis. This means that if I hold an axis off center, so if I hold the pitch at an angle for 2 seconds, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, then it's going to lock into that new position. And you may want to do this on set for one reason or another. Maybe you want a canted angle with the horizon. Then you can reset the horizon by doing that. Most often you're just going to want to keep the original settings. But the 2 seconds just is referencing repositioning your camera right here. When you calibrate, then you'll hit the Calibrate EL field, and the gimbal is going to run through multiple steps of each axis moving. In the previous versions of software, you physically need to move your gimbal into the 3 different positions, and you want to calibrate in the lock mode. So right now we're in the follow mode, and you're not going to be able to calibrate your encoders. So you would go back to profile 3, write that, And now you can actually calibrate the EL field, and it takes maybe 30 seconds for each axis to calibrate. And it's going to be beeping. It may be kind of annoying, but it is good to have those calibrated. And again, we've programmed everything ahead of time, so you don't need to mess with this unless your gimbal is not performing right. After doing the calibrate EL field, then you have to calibrate the offset. And to do this, just make sure the motors are all lined up properly and everything's level. And then you'll hit calibrate offset. It's already calibrated, so the numbers didn't really change. And then you hit right. When the encoders are properly calibrated, right here where it says motor encoder gearing ratio should be right around 1. You can see it's a little bit over here and a little bit under right there, but the numbers are really close to 1. If you're getting something like 0.5 or 1.5 or 2, then it's not properly calibrated. So you will actually need to go through the calibration steps again and make sure that's calibrated. That covers the calibration of the encoders. And then filters, this affects the vibrations of your gimbal. Checked right here for the D low pass filter, and it doesn't make a huge difference whether these are checked or not, but I have noticed that some of the vibrations are eliminated with this checked and set to 200. This is doing a very similar thing to back in the basic tab where you have your adaptive PID gain controls. It's just helping eliminate some of those vibrations, and it does affect the performance a little bit. So if you don't need it, then don't select it. I think you get the best performance when none of those filters are checked. But if you're going to be maxing out the gimbal's performance and going to an angle that it's not usually in, you may get more vibrations. So that's when you actually want it checked. The low pass filter also affects vibrations, but I've noticed a better performance if I don't enable this section right here. And then scripting, every other tab on here you don't need to worry about. That pretty much sums up any adjustments you may want to make to the software. Basic tab is really where you're going to be just adjusting the power or this D value right here if you're going to be changing cameras. Like if you wanted to put a 5-pound camera on here, you're probably going to want some more power to the motors. And you may want to adjust the follow mode. Those are pretty much the only 2 things you're really going to need to adjust, but I just wanted to run through everything in the software so you kind of get a good idea of how everything works. When you're done, then just say disconnect up here. And then your software is disconnected, so you can go ahead and close out of it. Unplug your gimbal. We'll go back to the follow mode, 1 push, and now you can take off and operate your gimbal.